Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the Great Council chamber, watching as the 12 ancient races debated her people's future without her. The chamber was enormous, built to impress visitors with its soaring crystal walls and floating platforms. Each alien delegation sat on their own platform, surrounded by holographic displays that showed their vast territories across the galaxy. 50 years had passed since first contact. 50 years since humanity joined the Galactic Council after proving themselves in the terrible war against the HFY. Those parasitic creatures had swept across 3 spiral arms, consuming entire worlds. The war had lasted 8 years, and humanity had been the turning point. Human tactics, human stubbornness, human refusal to give up when all seemed lost. These things had saved the galaxy. But that was half a century ago. The council members had forgotten. Sarah watched the Zephyrian delegate float above his platform, his 4 arms moving gracefully as he spoke. The Zephyrians looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin and too many joints. They had been traders and diplomats for thousands of years, and they spoke with the confidence of those who had never known real defeat. "The matter is simple," the Zephyrian said, his voice echoing through the chamber's translation system. "The 3 human colonies in the Outer Rim produce 70% of the galaxy's food surplus. Such resources cannot remain under the control of a single species, especially one so young." Sarah's jaw tightened. Those colonies were home to nearly 50 million humans. Farmers, engineers, teachers, families who had built their lives on worlds that Earth had terraformed with decades of hard work and sacrifice. The ethereal delegate spoke next. Vexithara was ancient even by ethereal standards, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering robe. The ethereals claimed to be the first intelligent species in the galaxy, and they acted like it. Their technology was so advanced it seemed like magic to most other races. "Indeed," Vexthara's voice whispered directly into every mind in the chamber. "The Rigelians require agricultural worlds for their expanding population. The humans have 3 such worlds, but only enough population to properly utilize 2. Logic dictates redistribution." Sarah stepped forward. "Those are human worlds. Our people live there. You can't just give them away." A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the chamber. The Krogan representative, a massive creature covered in thick armor plates, made a sound like grinding stone. "The human speaks as if they have equal voice here." "They do have equal voice," Sarah said, her hand moving instinctively toward the weapon at her side. "Earth is a founding member of the Terran Alliance. We signed the same treaties as everyone else." Vexthara's form flickered with what Sarah had learned was the ethereal equivalent of a condescending smile. "Young species often struggle to understand the greater cosmic order. You have been part of the Council for barely a moment in galactic terms. Your contributions during the HFY War were useful, but that does not grant you the same status as civilizations that have guided this galaxy for millennia." The vote was swift and decisive. 10 voices for redistribution. Only Earth and their sole ally, the Centaurian Republic, voted against. The Centaurians were barely older than humanity in galactic terms, another young race that the Council tolerated rather than respected. "The matter is decided," announced the Council's AI moderator. "The agricultural worlds of Demeter, Ceres, and Gaia will be transferred to Rigelian administration within 60 standard days. Human populations will be relocated to appropriate substitute worlds." Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger, she had expected this. For months, her intelligence reports had warned that the Council was moving toward this decision. What settled in her chest was disappointment. Disappointment that these ancient, wise species had learned nothing from history. "There will be no relocation," Sarah said quietly. The chamber fell silent. Every translator stopped working for a moment as the various species processed what they had heard. Vexithara's form brightened with what Sarah recognized as surprise. "Excuse me? I said there will be no relocation." Sarah's voice carried clearly across the chamber. "Those worlds belong to humanity. The families living there have been there for generations. They're not moving." The Krogan delegate leaned forward on his platform. "You would defy the Council?" Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the alien gazes of beings who commanded fleets that could shatter planets. "I'm informing the Council that their decision is unacceptable to the Terran Alliance." "Unacceptable?" The Zephyrian's voice rose in pitch. Young species, you seem to have forgotten your place. The council's word is final. No, Sarah said. It's not. She turned and walked toward the chamber's exit. Behind her, voices erupted in a dozen languages. Threats, warnings, expressions of disbelief that a human would dare challenge the established order. At the threshold, Sarah paused and looked back. You want those worlds? Come and take them. The chamber's great doors sealed behind her with a sound like thunder. Sarah's aide, Lieutenant Commander Torres, was waiting in the corridor. His face was pale but determined. Admiral, Earth Command is standing by for your signal. Tell them to execute Protocol 7, Sarah said as they walked toward the transport bay. Torres' eyes widened. Protocol 7 was the contingency plan Earth had hoped never to use. The plan they had prepared in secret for exactly this situation. All of it, ma'am. All of it. Sarah's voice was steady, but Torres could hear the steel beneath. Send the message to every human colony, every ship, every station. The Council has forgotten what we're capable of. It's time to remind them. As their transport lifted away from the Council station, Sarah looked back at the massive structure. It had stood for 10,000 years, a symbol of galactic unity and order. The various species had built it together after the last Great War, swearing that never again would the galaxy tear itself apart. But they had forgotten the most important lesson of war. Peace only lasts as long as those who want peace are stronger than those who would break it. The Council had grown comfortable. They had forgotten that their power came not from their ancient wisdom or their advanced technology, but from the fact that other species chose to accept their authority. They had forgotten that choice could be withdrawn. Sarah activated her personal communicator. This is Admiral Chen to Earth Command. I'm coming home. Begin Phase 1 immediately. Acknowledged, Admiral. Welcome back to the war. The transport jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying Sarah away from the Council station and toward a human space that was about to become very busy. Behind her, the Council continued their debate, still not understanding that the time for talking had passed. They thought humanity was just another young species that needed to learn its place. They would learn soon enough that humanity's place was wherever humans decided to stand. And humans had decided to stand on their own worlds, no matter what the Council thought about it. The war they had forgotten was about to remember them. The war room beneath the Terran Defense Ministry looked like it had been built for this moment. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the head of a massive holographic display, showing every human colony, ship, and station in the galaxy. Red indicators marked the 3 disputed worlds, while blue dots represented the locations of Earth's hidden assets. General Marcus Torres, head of Earth's Special Operations Division, stood beside her. Unlike his nephew who served as her aide, Marcus was older, scarred from the HFY War, and had spent the last 50 years preparing for this day. How long do we have? Sarah asked. The Council will send diplomatic protests first, Marcus replied, manipulating the hologram to show Council fleet positions. Maybe 2 weeks of angry messages. Then they'll dispatch a peacekeeping force to show they're serious. After that, he shrugged, depends on how stupid they want to be. Around the table sat the other members of Earth's Secret War Council. Admiral Zhang Wei commanded the Home Fleet. General Catherine Walsh ran Colonial Defense. Dr. Elena Vasquez headed the Advanced Research Division. And Director James Morrison controlled Earth's intelligence networks. They had been meeting in secret for decades, planning for the day when humanity's alliance with the Council would end. Show them, Sarah said. Marcus nodded and activated a new display. The hologram changed, showing not just human space but the entire galaxy. What appeared made everyone in the Council chamber 50 years ago look like children playing with toys. Hidden bases throughout human space lit up in green. Military shipyards that officially didn't exist. Research stations conducting experiments the Council didn't know about. And fleets, dozens of fleets that had been built in secret over 5 decades. Project Lazarus, Marcus said, named after the man who came back from the dead. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. The Council thinks our technology is 50 years behind theirs. They're right about some things. Wrong about others. She activated another display. They never asked what we were doing with our quantum research. They assumed we were trying to copy their faster-than-light drives. We weren't. The display showed technical specifications that would have made Council scientists weep. Quantum fold drives that could move ships across the galaxy in hours instead of days. Adaptive AI systems that learned and evolved in real time, and weapons that used principles the Council had never discovered, because they had stopped pushing the boundaries of physics millennia ago. The ethereals were the first to achieve faster-than-light travel, Admiral Zhang said. 10,000 years ago. They've been using the same basic technology ever since, just making it bigger and more efficient. They never asked if there was a better way. The Krogans have the strongest armor and the biggest guns, General Walsh added. They've been building the same type of ships for 5,000 years. Bigger, stronger, but never different. Director Morrison activated his own display. The Zephyrians have the best intelligence network in the galaxy. They know everything that happens in Council space. He smiled coldly. They know almost nothing about what happens in human space. Sarah studied the displays. 50 years of preparation, 50 years of learning from every species in the Council, taking their knowledge and improving on it. 50 years of humans doing what humans did best, adapting, evolving, and preparing for war. Why didn't we share this technology with the Council? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Because they never asked, Marcus replied. They saw us as junior partners. Useful for grunt work, but not equals. They took our reports on technological development and filed them away without reading them. Dr. Vasquez activated a historical display. Remember the HFY War. We kept asking the Council for better weapons, better ships, better tactics. They said we should be grateful for what we had. So we built our own. The display showed human ships from the war, crude, rough, but effective. Ships designed by a species that had been fighting wars for its entire existence. Ships that won battles not through superior technology, but through superior tactics and sheer bloody-minded determination. The Council species stopped fighting each other ages ago, Sarah observed. They've had peace for millennia. Peace makes you soft, Marcus said bluntly. Earth has only had real peace for 50 years, and even then we kept preparing. These other species, some of them haven't fought a real war in 5,000 years. Admiral Zhang pulled up personnel files. Look at their military leaders. The ethereals choose their commanders based on philosophical wisdom. The Zephyrians promote based on diplomatic skill. The Krogans pick the oldest warriors, assuming age equals experience. And humans? Sarah asked. We pick the ones who win, General Walsh said simply. Director Morrison activated a new set of displays showing Council military readiness. The information made Sarah's jaw clench. They've let their fleets decay. Most of their ships haven't seen real combat in centuries. Their crews train with simulations based on battles that happened before humans learned to make fire. They're fighting the last war, Marcus said. Classic mistake. Meanwhile, we've been preparing for the next one. Dr. Vasquez brought up another display showing human technological development. We didn't just copy their technology. We asked different questions. They wanted to know how to make their ships bigger and faster. We wanted to know how to make ours more adaptable and survivable. Show her the real surprise, Marcus said quietly. Dr. Vasquez hesitated, then activated a display that made everyone in the room go silent. It showed a map of human space, but not as the Council understood it. Hidden connections between colonies, secret manufacturing facilities, and something else. Something that would terrify the Council if they knew about it. We didn't just build ships and weapons, Dr. Vasquez said softly. We built an entirely parallel infrastructure. The Council thinks they know where all our colonies are, where our shipyards are, where our research facilities are. They know about maybe half, Director Morrison added. The half we wanted them to know about. Sarah stared at the display. Hidden colonies throughout human space. Entire worlds that existed off the Council's charts. Populations that had been growing and developing for decades without Council oversight. How many? She asked. Total human population in Council records? 300 million, Morrison replied. Actual human population? He paused. 800 million. The room fell silent. Sarah sat down heavily. Humanity hadn't just been preparing for war. They had been preparing for independence. Complete independence. The 3 agricultural worlds they want? General Walsh asked. We can evacuate them completely in 72 hours. Every person, every piece of useful equipment, even the soil if we want to. Let them have empty rocks. But that's not the point, Sarah said quietly. The point is that they think they can just take what's ours. Exactly, Marcus replied. If we let them take those worlds, they'll take more and more. Until we're back to being servants instead of allies. Sarah stood and looked around the room. These people had spent their entire adult lives preparing for a war they hoped would never come. But when the time came, they were ready. How long before we can begin operations? We began 6 hours ago, Marcus replied. Phase 1 is already in motion. The moment you walked out of that council chamber, every human military unit in the galaxy shifted to war readiness. And the council doesn't know? Director Morrison smiled. The council will know when we want them to know. And by then it will be too late. Sarah nodded. The die was cast. After 50 years of peace, humanity was going back to war. But this time they wouldn't be fighting to save the galaxy. They would be fighting to save themselves, and they were going to win. The Council enforcement fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Demeter system, expecting to find a busy agricultural world full of humans who would surrender peacefully. Instead, they found nothing. Fleet Admiral Keth Moran of the Rigelian Navy stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the scanner displays in disbelief. Demeter should have been covered in cities, farms, and industrial complexes. His sensors showed a planet with perfect atmosphere, ideal soil, and abundant water, but no people, no buildings, no infrastructure. Scan again, he ordered his communications officer. Sir, the scans are accurate. The planet shows no signs of current habitation, but there are strange readings in the soil composition. Admiral Keth Moran's species looked like tall, thin humans with gray skin and large black eyes. The Rigelians had been traders and diplomats for 3,000 years, and they were not used to mysteries. What kind of strange readings? The topsoil appears to have been artificially removed down to a depth of 2 meters across 70% of the planet's surface. The remaining soil has been treated with some kind of chemical compound that makes it unsuitable for agriculture. The Admiral's mandibles clicked together in frustration. They poisoned their own world? Not poisoned, sir. The compound appears to be designed to break down over time. The planet will be suitable for agriculture again in approximately 50 years. On the view screen, a message beacon activated. The holographic image of Admiral Sarah Chen appeared, wearing her old military uniform from the HFY War. Behind her stood the flag of the Terran Alliance. To the Council Enforcement Fleet, Sarah's recorded message began. You will find that the worlds you seek to claim have been evacuated according to human law. Every citizen, every piece of equipment, every ounce of useful material has been relocated to worlds that remain under Terran control. Admiral Keth Moran leaned forward. This was not how colonies usually responded to Council directives. Furthermore, Sarah continued, the Terran Alliance formally withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. We recognize no Council authority over human space or human worlds. Any attempt to enforce Council within our territory will be considered an act of war. The message ended with coordinates to the other 2 disputed worlds and a simple statement. Same message applies. Admiral Keth Moran immediately sent word back to the Council. Within hours, an emergency session was called. The ancient beings who ruled the galaxy were not used to defiance, especially from a species they considered barely civilized. Vexithera's energy form flickered with what might have been anger. This is unacceptable. No member species has ever withdrawn from the Council. Then perhaps came a new voice. It is time they learned the consequences of such foolishness. The speaker was War Commander Thackrell, of the ethereal military caste. The ethereals rarely spoke of their military arm, preferring to present themselves as philosophers and scientists. But they had not ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years through wisdom alone. A demonstration is required, Thackrell continued. The humans must be shown that Council authority is absolute. What do you propose? Asked the Zephyrian delegate. I will take a battle fleet to Earth itself. Not to destroy. We are not barbarians, but to show our strength. When the humans see 200 ethereal warships in their home system, they will remember their place. The vote was swift and unanimous. The humans needed to be reminded of the natural order. 3 days later, War Commander Thackrell's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. His flagship, the Eternal Wisdom, was a massive vessel that had seen service in wars older than human civilization. Around it floated 199 other ships of the ethereal navy, each one capable of destroying a city from orbit. Thackrell stood on his bridge, surrounded by displays showing the primitive human home system. 9 planets, a few asteroid mining stations, and what appeared to be a small defensive fleet of maybe 30 ships clustered around the third planet. Pathetic, muttered his second-in-command. 30 ships against 200. Open communications with the human fleet, Thackrell ordered. The response came from Admiral Sarah Chen herself, broadcasting from what appeared to be the bridge of a human warship. Her ship looked crude compared to ethereal vessels, all angles and armor plating instead of the elegant curves of advanced technology. War Commander Thackrell, Sarah said calmly. I'm surprised the Council sent you personally. You know me. I make it my business to know the military leaders of potential enemies, Sarah replied. Your service record is impressive. 17 major battles never defeated. Thackrell felt a flicker of surprise. Few beings outside the ethereal military knew his history. Then you understand the futility of resistance. Surrender now and the Council will show mercy. Sarah smiled, and something in that smile made Thackrell's energy form flicker with unease. Commander, I've studied every battle you've ever fought. I know your tactics, your strategies, your preferred formations. You're a brilliant military leader. And you've never fought humans. The attack came without warning. One moment Thackrell was looking at 30 human ships arranged in what appeared to be a defensive formation. The next moment, his entire fleet was under assault from what seemed like everywhere at once. The human ships moved like nothing he had ever seen. They didn't follow standard military doctrine. They didn't maintain proper formations. They attacked from impossible angles, disappeared when fired upon, and reappeared where they shouldn't be able to go. How are they moving like that? His tactical officer shouted over the chaos. Unknown. Their drive signatures don't match any known technology. Thackrell watched in growing horror as his magnificent fleet was carved apart by ships that shouldn't have been able to hurt them. Human weapons cut through ethereal shields like they weren't there. Human ships absorbed punishment that should have destroyed them and kept fighting. Sir, the Wisdom's light has been destroyed. The Ancient Glory is requesting immediate assistance. How? Thackrell demanded. How are they doing this? His answer came from Admiral Chen's voice over the communications system. We learned from the best, Commander. We studied every species in the Council. We took your technology and improved it. We took your tactics and made them better. On his displays, Thackrell watched another of his ships explode. This is impossible. We have superior numbers. Numbers don't matter if you're fighting the wrong war, Sarah replied. You're fighting like this is the last war. We're fighting like this is the next one. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the ethereal fleet was scattered wreckage drifting through space. Some ships had been destroyed outright. Others had been disabled and boarded by human forces. A few had managed to escape back to faster-than-light speed. Thackrell's own flagship was crippled, its weapons offline and its engines destroyed. Through the smoke and sparks on his bridge, he watched as human ships took up positions around his vessel. Admiral Chen's image appeared on his view screen again. This time she wasn't smiling. Commander, you have 2 choices. Surrender your remaining ships and personnel, or watch them be destroyed one by one. Thackrell looked around his ruined bridge. His officers stared at their displays in shock. The greatest military force in the galaxy had been defeated by a species the Council considered primitive. I surrender, he said quietly. Smart choice. Sarah's image flickered. Your crews will be treated according to the laws of war. Your ships will be studied, and you, Commander, will carry a message back to the Council. What message? That humanity is no longer asking for respect. We're demanding it, and we're prepared to enforce that demand against anyone who thinks otherwise. The transmission ended, leaving Thackrell alone with the wreckage of his fleet and the knowledge that the galaxy had just changed forever. The young species the Council had dismissed as primitive had just proven they were anything but, and this was just the beginning. The news of the ethereal fleet's destruction spread through Council space like wildfire. Within hours, every species in the galaxy knew that the impossible had happened. The mighty ethereals, who had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, had been crushed by the humans everyone thought were harmless newcomers. On the Council station, emergency sessions ran around the clock. The great chamber that had seen centuries of calm debate now echoed with angry voices and panicked arguments. This is impossible, roared Commander Gektar of the Krogan fleet. The ethereals have the most advanced ships in the galaxy. Had, corrected the Zephyrian delegate, his forearms trembling with barely controlled fear. War Commander Thackrell confirmed it himself. 200 ships destroyed or captured. The humans didn't even lose a single vessel. Counselor Vexthara's energy form flickered rapidly, a sign of deep distress among ethereals. The reports make no sense. Human technology was decades behind ours. How could they have advanced so far without our knowledge? The answer came from an unexpected source. Director Ilveth of the Centaurian Republic stood up from her small platform. The Centaurians were almost as young as the humans in galactic terms, and their opinion was usually ignored by the older species. Because you never asked, she said simply. For 50 years, the humans submitted progress reports on their research. I've reviewed them all. The information was there. You just never bothered to read it. The chamber fell silent. Ilveth activated a holographic display that showed decades of human research reports, filed away and forgotten in the Council's vast archives. Quantum fold drive technology, reported 15 years ago. Adaptive AI systems, reported 12 years ago. Advanced materials science, reported continuously for the past 20 years. The humans told you everything they were doing. You chose to ignore it. Vexithara's form pulsed with what might have been embarrassment. The report seemed routine, standard colonial research. That was the point, Ilveth replied. They knew you wouldn't pay attention to routine reports from a junior species, so they hid their greatest advances in plain sight. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The chamber's central display activated, showing tactical reports from across Council space. Multiple human fleets have been detected moving through Council territory, announced the station's AI. 17 separate task forces, each consisting of between 10 and 50 vessels. Commander Gektar leaned forward, his armored face grim. Where are they heading? Unknown. Their movement patterns do not conform to any recognized military doctrine. The answer became clear over the next few days. The human fleets weren't targeting military installations or major worlds. Instead, they struck with surgical precision at infrastructure targets throughout Council space. Communication relay stations went silent. Supply depots disappeared overnight. The massive shipyards that had built Council fleets for millennia found their orbital facilities evacuated at gunpoint. Their workers relocated to human-controlled space. Most shocking of all, the humans weren't destroying everything they captured. Instead, they were liberating it. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on communication screens across the galaxy, broadcasting from the bridge of her flagship. Behind her stood not just the flag of the Terran Alliance, but the flags of dozens of other species. Citizens of the galaxy, she began. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council has claimed to represent your interests. For 10,000 years, they have made decisions about your lives, your worlds, your futures without asking what you wanted. The broadcast was being picked up on worlds throughout Council territory, on mining colonies where workers lived in conditions little better than slavery, on agricultural worlds where entire populations existed to feed the Council's core systems, on industrial planets where safety regulations were ignored to maintain production quotas. The Terran Alliance offers you a choice, Sarah continued. Continue to accept Council rule or join us in building something better. A confederation of free worlds where each species controls its own destiny. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On dozens of worlds, colonial governments declared independence from the Council and requested protection from human forces. Entire species that had been junior partners in the Galactic Order suddenly found themselves with a powerful ally willing to treat them as equals. The Rigelians were the first major Council member to break ranks. Their ambassador, Admiral Kethmaran, the same officer who had found empty worlds instead of human colonies, arrived at the Council station with a formal declaration. The Rigelian Republic withdraws from the Galactic Council, he announced to a shocked chamber. We will be joining the Terran Alliance as equal partners. You cannot be serious, Vexthara whispered, her energy form flickering with disbelief. The Rigelians have been Council members for 3,000 years. 3,000 years of being told what to do by species who consider us children, Admiral Kethmoran replied. The humans treat us like adults. They share technology instead of hoarding it. They ask for our opinions instead of ignoring them. Over the following weeks, the defections continued. The Andorians, the Tau-Cetians, the Proxima Collective. One by one, the younger Council species abandoned the ancient alliance and joined humanity's rebellion. But it was War Commander Thackrell's testimony that finally broke the spirit of the Council's leadership. The ethereal commander had been returned to Council space as promised, along with detailed recordings of the battle that destroyed his fleet. He stood before the emergency council, his energy form dim with shame and something else. Respect. They fought like nothing I have ever encountered, he reported. Not like a species that has been civilized for 50 years. Like a species that has been fighting for 50,000 years and has learned from every battle. Elaborate, Vexithara commanded. Their tactics were perfect counters to our standard formations. Their weapons were specifically designed to penetrate our shields. Their ships moved in patterns that suggested they knew exactly how our targeting systems worked. Thackrell paused. It was not a battle between equals. It was a demonstration by a superior force showing mercy to an inferior one. The chamber erupted in protests. The ethereals were the most advanced species in the galaxy. They could not be inferior to anyone, especially not the humans. Show them the recordings, Thackrell said quietly. The tactical displays that followed showed the battle from the ethereal perspective. What they revealed was worse than a defeat, it was a lesson. The humans had not just won. They had won easily, with minimal losses, while fighting in a way that made it clear they could have destroyed the entire ethereal fleet in minutes if they had chosen to. They were playing with us, Thackrell continued, like adults teaching children. Every move we made they had anticipated. Every tactic we tried they had a counter ready. We were not fighting an enemy. We were being educated. Counselor Vexithara's form flickered rapidly. What do they want? Admiral Chen made that clear, Thackrell replied. They want to be left alone to govern themselves as they see fit. They want an end to the Council's assumption that age equals wisdom. And they want to ensure that no single power ever again has the ability to dictate terms to the rest of the galaxy. And if we refuse? Thackrell was quiet for a long moment. Then they will continue their demonstrations until we no longer have the power to refuse. The session ended in chaos. Some council members called for total war against the human rebellion. Others suggested negotiation. A few began making quiet inquiries about the terms of joining the Terran Alliance themselves. But in the private chambers of the council's leadership, a different conversation was taking place. Vexithara met with the senior representatives of the oldest species, and for the first time in millennia, these ancient beings faced a truth they had long forgotten. They were no longer the strongest force in the galaxy. The young species they had dismissed as primitive had spent 50 years learning everything they could teach, and then surpassed them all. The students had become the masters, and the masters had become obsolete. The age of the Galactic Council was ending. The age of humanity had begun. The meeting took place aboard the human flagship Indomitable, deep in space between the former Council territory and the growing Terran Alliance. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the head of a conference table that had been hastily constructed for this historic occasion. Across from her sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy, or what remained of their power. Counselor Vexithara's energy form flickered nervously in her containment suit. Beside her, Commander Gektar of the Krogans sat in massive armor that couldn't hide his species' defeat. The Zephyrian delegate floated in his mobility chair, all four arms folded in what humans had learned was a gesture of submission. You asked for this meeting, Sarah said simply. What do you want? Vexithara spoke first. Her voice transmitted directly into the minds of everyone present. We want to understand your terms. Terms? Sarah raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware we were negotiating. The Council attacked human territory. We defended ourselves. The Council lost. You destroyed our fleet, Commander Gektar rumbled. You took our colonies. You turned our allies against us. We liberated colonies that wanted to be free, Sarah corrected. We accepted the allegiance of species that chose to join us voluntarily, and we defended ourselves against an unprovoked attack on our home system. The Zephyrian delegate leaned forward. What do you intend to do with your victory? Sarah looked around the table at the representatives of species that had ruled the galaxy longer than humans had existed. They expected her to demand tribute, to claim their worlds, to establish humanity as the new galactic overlords. Instead, she surprised them. Nothing, she said. The aliens exchanged glances, confusion clear in their body language. Nothing? Vexithara repeated. We don't want to rule the galaxy, Sarah explained. We never did. We just wanted to be left alone to develop as we saw fit, without interference from species who thought they knew what was best for us. Then what was the point of all this? Commander Gektar demanded. The battles, the destruction, the rebellion? Sarah stood and activated a holographic display showing the current state of galactic politics. Where once the Council's territory had covered most of known space, now dozens of independent regions existed. Some had joined the Terran Alliance. Others had formed their own confederations. A few remained loyal to what was left of the Council. The point was to prove that your way wasn't the only way, Sarah said. For 10,000 years, the Council has operated on the assumption that older species are wiser, that centralized authority prevents conflict, that peace comes through strength, concentrated in the hands of a few. She changed the display to show conflict statistics from before and after the rebellion. Since the Council's authority collapsed, galaxy-wide conflicts have decreased by 60%. Trade has increased by 40%. Technological development has accelerated by orders of magnitude. It turns out that when species are allowed to govern themselves, they do it better than when they're governed by others. The Zephyrian delegates' mandibles clicked in what might have been skepticism. And you expect this freedom to last? What happens when disputes arise between independent species? The same thing that happens now, Sarah replied. They'll be settled through negotiation, trade agreements, defensive alliances, and when necessary, limited conflicts between the actual parties involved. What won't happen is a small group of ancient species making decisions for everyone else. Vexithara's form pulsed with what Sarah had learned was frustration. You speak as if the Council accomplished nothing in 10,000 years of peace. The Council accomplished a great deal, Sarah acknowledged. You ended the massive wars that were tearing the galaxy apart. You established trade networks that allowed different species to prosper. You created the infrastructure that made galactic civilization possible. Then why destroy it? Because the job was finished, Sarah said simply. The galaxy no longer needed a parental authority to keep species from destroying each other. But the Council couldn't let go of power. Even when that power was no longer necessary, she activated another display, this one showing human population and development statistics over the past 50 years. Do you know why humanity advanced so quickly? Sarah asked. It wasn't because we're naturally superior to other species. It was because we were afraid. Afraid of being conquered, afraid of being enslaved, afraid of being wiped out by enemies we couldn't defeat. Fear? Commander Gektar seemed puzzled. Fear is weakness. Fear is motivation, Sarah corrected. The Council species stopped being afraid centuries ago. You achieved dominance and then got comfortable. You stopped pushing the boundaries of what was possible because you didn't need to. She gestured to the display showing human technological development. We never stopped being afraid. Every advance we made, every weapon we built, every ship we launched, all of it was driven by the knowledge that someday we might have to fight for our survival again. And when that day came, we were ready. The conference room fell silent. The representatives of the former galactic powers contemplated the implications of what they were hearing. Finally, Vexithara spoke. What happens now? What happens to the Council species? Whatever you want to happen, Sarah replied. You're free to rebuild your territories as independent nations. You can join the Terran Alliance if you meet the membership requirements. You can form new confederations with species that share your values. Or you can try to rebuild the old Council if you can find enough species willing to accept your authority again. And if we choose to fight? Commander Gektar asked. Sarah's expression didn't change. Then you'll lose. Quickly and decisively. We've proven that human forces are superior to Council forces in every meaningful way, but we'd prefer not to fight at all. The Zephyrian delegate activated his own display. The Terran Alliance has been accepting new members. What are these membership requirements you mentioned? Democratic governance of member worlds, Sarah replied. Respect for individual rights regardless of species. Commitment to mutual defense against external threats. And agreement to submit disputes to arbitration rather than war. The same principles the Council claimed to represent, Vexithara observed. The same principles the Council abandoned when it became convenient, Sarah corrected. The difference is that the Alliance doesn't claim authority over non-member worlds. If a species wants to live under authoritarian rule, that's their choice, as long as they don't try to impose that rule on others. The meeting continued for several hours, covering the practical details of the galaxy's new political structure. Trade agreements, territorial boundaries, defense pacts, technology sharing. All the mundane but vital work of rebuilding civilization on new foundations. When it was over, the former council representatives departed with something they hadn't expected: hope. Hope that the galaxy's future might be brighter than its past. 10 years later, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in a very different conference room. This one was on Earth, in the headquarters of the Galactic Defense Coalition. Around the table sat officers from a dozen different species: humans, Rigelians, Centaurians, and even a few former council species that had adapted to the new order. The room was filled with young officers studying tactical displays and strategic analyses. They were learning lessons that the old council had forgotten: that power unchecked inevitably becomes tyranny, that peace requires strength, and that sometimes the greatest service one can perform is to remind the powerful that their power has limits. Director Chen asked a young ethereal officer, her energy form bright with curiosity. "My people ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. How do we know the Alliance won't make the same mistakes?" Sarah smiled, remembering her own questions at that age. "Because we're designed not to. The Alliance has no permanent leaders, no hereditary positions, no species-based privileges. Every few years the leadership changes. Every major decision requires approval from multiple independent bodies. And most importantly, any member can leave whenever they want. But what if someone tries to take over? What if a single species becomes too powerful? Then the rest of the Alliance will remind them what happened to the last group that thought they were irreplaceable," Sarah replied. "The galaxy has learned a hard lesson about the price of complacency. I don't think anyone is eager to repeat the Council's mistakes." She looked around the room at the young faces, human, alien, and everything in between. They were the future of galactic civilization, raised in a galaxy where no single species dominated others, where strength came from cooperation rather than domination. "The Council forgot that humans don't just fight wars," Sarah said, addressing the room as a whole. "We study them, we learn from them, and we make sure that when peace comes, we're ready for the next time someone mistakes our restraint for weakness." She paused, letting the lesson sink in. "That's not just true of humans. It's true of any species that wants to remain free. Vigilance is the price of liberty. And the moment we forget that, we'll deserve whatever happens to us." The young officers nodded, understanding the weight of the responsibility they were inheriting. They would be the guardians of a new galactic order, one built not on the dominance of the few but on the cooperation of the many.